What's good, guys? You guys all see the card on the screen. Yes, it's Striker Dragon, Dragon Link, whatever deck you want to call it now. It got first place at UDS Tulsa this past weekend, and I want to go over this deck real briefly because I don't even know everything, all the niche things about this deck. But I want to talk about this deck and one other deck that really broke out this past weekend. And going forward into this weekend, we have YCS Vegas, and I do expect to see a bunch of these decks that were in the top 32 breakdown, but these two decks were crazy to me, very different from anything else, and I didn't see them coming at all. So first place was the Dragon Link deck, whatever you want to call it, and it was played by only one player, so that's what's really unique. One person played it and they brought it all the way through Swiss undefeated, so I do think that this deck is very strong. I don't think it was just like a one-off circumstance, because you would not just see a random rogue deck go undefeated. Maybe it was a good meta call, but from what I can tell, from what I've read, from all the combos I've seen, and you guys can all check it out, the deck lists are all out. This deck is very crazy. It's a bunch of 1.5 card combos that end on 2-3 negates kind of thing, just like the old dragon decks that we've seen in the previous formats. Let's just go over Striker Dragon. It requires one level 4 or lower dragon monster. If this card is link summoned, you could add one boot sector launch from your deck to your hand. You can target one face-up monster you control and one rocket monster in your graveyard. Destroy that monster on the field, and if you do, add the other monster from the graveyard to your hand. Oh, you can only use each effect once per turn. So why is this crazy? I think it's crazy because it's just a link one that the boot sector launch is just a card that you add that revives another dragon, so it just gives you more materials to work with, and it just literally lets you set up for the LP, the Pitsy, the Romulus. You play all these different cards. There's other cards in this deck. The Star, obviously the Star Leech Safer. This card's fucking nuts, and it's about time it's getting abused. This card's so insane just because they can search the black and white Collapse Serpents. So just to go over the text real quick, you could send any number of dragon monsters from your hand and or face up field to the graveyard. Add one dragon monster from your deck to your hand whose level equals the total original levels of those monsters sent to the graveyard. And it has another effect. You could bench this card from your graveyard, then target one level 8 or light or dark dragon monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand, which is usually Levinair. But like I said, like this card, you just summon it and you can add black or white Collapse Serpent, and those cards are just so freaking insane. They're both at 1 for a reason. It's just honestly like cards like this in a vacuum, you just read them, you just see how crazy they are. Even Striker Dragon, you just know that they're crazy. So I'm just so happy to see these new cards being played in the format. First place, it's not a joke. I don't think this is a joke. I don't think rockets are just a joke. This card, Rocket Tracer, even in the past has seen some play, but like nobody really took it that seriously. And now we really are seeing these cards come to the forefront of the format. I'm very excited. I definitely want to test it out before I want to give you guys all my thoughts on it, but I do think this is a real deck, and I definitely do think people should check it out. All the rocket cards are very inexpensive. I think the expensive cards are going to be the Star Leech Safer and the extra deck. I think it's a relatively inexpensive deck. Striker Dragon, I know, is very going up now, but if you had them, you're lucky then. Definitely be on the lookout for this, especially at Vegas. I do think a lot of people are going to try playing this deck, especially because it's different. Don't get me wrong, there was so many spirals still. I believe it was 10 spirals in top 32, but it's not a crazy number. And spiral is going to be the deck to still beat, but I just think there's going to be newer decks now in the forefront that we're going to have to deal with, or we have the option to play. So the Dragon Link deck is one of the breakout decks of this past weekend at Tulsa, and the other deck, this deck is just so cool, the Invoke deck, but it's not just pure Invoke. This deck was second. There was 3 different people, I believe, playing it in top 32, but the highest one was second place. And the deck list is crazy. You guys should definitely check it out. It's by a player that I really know, and he's a really good player. I'm just like really happy for him. I know that he's been grinding for it for a long time, and this deck is just so different. Like Winda, the new Shadal cards, Invoke, it just the way that you guys really do have to check out the deck list. He explains it so much better than I really can, but the way that the deck just functions is so different, so unique. I've never been in a format with the Shadal cards, and I know it's a big fan favorite deck, so I'm happy to see all these cards back. What the deck essentially does is it goes first, and it just turbos out Winda and Caliga. So just imagine that 2 of the strongest floodgate monsters in this game, and almost every hand can just be Caliga and Winda, because now Cross Sheep is in the game, and Cross Sheep just revives the Caliga. It's so crazy to think about every hand, and then you can have just board breaking cards in your main deck, such as Shaddoll Fusion and Super Poly. I think this deck is going to see a lot of play. I know the Shaddolls are a fan favorite deck, and expect to see this at Vegas. Expect a lot of people to be playing it. I think this deck does have some weaknesses, but Invoked was never a deck that's going to be like the best deck in the format. Invoked's a deck that's supposed to counter the other decks, and that's exactly what this deck did. This Invoked Shaddoll deck, they all just turbo out Caliga and Winda, and there's no out game one for Spirals. And even when you go second, this deck main deck cards like Shaddoll Fusion and Super Poly, so you had a chance to even break the whole crazy field. So I really do think this deck's neat. I think it's a really cool deck. I think it is one of the meta decks, maybe like well on the bottom of like tier 1. I don't know if it's the best deck because there is some easy ways to beat Winda and Caliga. Like, it's just going to be scary, and I'm just happy to see new cards. Two breakout decks, the Rocket deck, the Striker Dragon, Safer, all these cards. Now Invoked is here too. Invoked Shaddoll and this Dragon Link deck that just really had such a strong showing. I'm just so happy to see these decks. Don't get me wrong, I've talked about this before. This is still the best deck. This is still the deck to beat. Everybody's main deck still should be catered towards trying to beat this deck, and these other two decks, that's what they're trying to do. The Dragon Link deck doesn't require that many cards to combo off, so it has room to play a bunch of hand traps to try to stop the other decks. And the same thing goes for the Invoked deck. The Invoked deck didn't play hand traps, but they went a different route to turbo out monsters that Spiral literally could not out. And if Spiral can't out it, most likely other decks will not be able to out it. So I think it was a cool way to approach Tulsa. I think at Vegas we definitely will see both of these decks and some of the other decks. I would just want to quickly mention there was a bunch of Altergeist, but a few True King Dinos and the Luna Light decks, and a few Salomon Great as usual. Those are the standard decks, except for the True King Dino. I want to look into that before I want to talk about that. But these two decks definitely will see play. There was a bunch of other decks. Format is very different. Format is very cool. I'm really happy with where this format's going. I hope Vegas shows us a bunch of other cool things, and I do hope more players do try to pick up all these different decks. Spiral is the deck to beat. That's definitely what's going to happen. I'm excited for Vegas. I want to see some good results. I have a bunch of my friends going. If they do well, I will have deck profiles up. Guys, let me know what you want to see, what you guys thought about these new decks, Tulsa, and going into Vegas, what your deck of choice is going to be.